Hello? Really? Stopped cold in their tracks? Why? They had them on the run, didn't they? Okay, I see. Well, let me know how things go from here. Okay, thank you. What happens when you plan an offensive over the course of several rounds, the first of its kind your nation will be performing? Something so important that success could mean the difference between life and death of your ally. Well, if you're the United States this round, the landings in Gibraltar are just that. Good evening, I'm Zachary Fielding, and this is Theater Commanders Round 4. Things are really starting to heat up, with exciting new offensives kicking off around the globe. I'm very excited to cover it with all of you, but let's first refresh our memories of last round. Last round, we saw Germany shatter the Soviet 41st positions in the south of Russia around the Bryansk-Kiev defensive line, with the Soviets quickly maneuvering their forces into a desperate position to counterattack the Germans if they were to fully commit into Bryansk, which is also known as the gateway to Moscow. This area is key for Moscow defense. Things do look desperate, with General Fitch giving temporary command of the 62nd to General Nickel, now with the second and third largest cities in the country effectively abandoned to the enemy. Italy commissioned a new battleship to hopefully help them hold on to their control of the Mediterranean, and Japan in the Pacific now positioned to conduct two massive offensives, one against the Chinese in Western China under General Hutchinson's command, and the other in the South Pacific, being carried out by Admiral Tom Bonner's naval forces. And now we are to the events of Round 4. So let's check in on what the Germans are up to along the Eastern Front and what the operations are going to look like from here going forward. Now, Field Marshal Dave Scamardella, commanding from the front in Western Ukraine, does fall back to the rear to attend a meeting called by Führer Smith. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the course of the war on both fronts going forward. And we will first listen to General Jeff Scamardella's proposal for the plans of the Western defense, before looking at what Field Marshal Scamardella wants to do in the East.
So the plan in Europe as it stands right now is to start establishing defensive units. To your point, my intention would be to have slow movers, mostly artillery in Paris, and be able to build mechanized units, tanks, things like that behind it, so I can hit anywhere along the coast. We'll end up blocking this turn so that the Americans can't land, keep our options open to defend where we need to defend, but until the Americans and the British have a more threatening force, we're kind of in a position where we can just continue to fund and funnel units into Russia. Obviously now we've talked about how we might have to end up putting some units into southern Italy, which hopefully deters any landing attempt, as we don't want to see the Italians lose that spend and the British gain the IPCs. So just trying to work through some things that could have been avoided, but that's neither here nor there.
So as you see, General Scamardella is confident his forces can hold back the Allies even if the Americans successfully land in Gibraltar and take back the fortress. He feels like resources can continue to flow east, at least for another round or two, as he establishes a strike force centered around Paris and West Germany to allow his Fourth Army to strike along the entire coast. As for Field Marshal Scamardella, his original plan needs to be adjusted. So let's see what his proposals are from here going forward.
The goal right now for the Germans in Russia is to get the Russians to pull back to Moscow. We can either hold them in place there or attack them depending on the numbers. If we are holding them in place, then we need to work our way to the south, pick up the IPCs and the bonuses that are available to us. This way we can split spends and turn Germany into a fortress. But the goal right now is to capture the factory in Ukraine, be able to build 6 units right there, no supply chain issues, and hopefully put them in a position where they need to hit us, because their army is much stronger defensively than it is offensively. So if we can bait them into something like that, that would be ideal.
So as you see, Dave's new plan is only to strike Moscow if the Soviets should mess up and leave a window of opportunity. The main plan now is to first secure the flanks, while keeping the Soviets pinned to Moscow as his armies push south instead, to hopefully capture Stalingrad and the Caucasus. This will give a huge money bonus to Germany and help them better fund their war effort in this growing war, with the second front looking more and more likely to open up in the west. So Stalingrad along the Volga River and Baku in southern Caucasus are now the primary targets. This will also force the British to hopefully pull their forces back to protect the Middle East and all the investments they have in that region, forcing them to choose between self-preservation or aid to the Soviets. So this is a 3-round goal, known as Operation Fadenneedle, which translates to threaded needle, with phase 1 of operations kicking off this round as Germany moves to secure their flanks. Attacks take place in Bryansk, Ukraine, the Baltic states, and another air raid over Moscow to keep the Soviets off balance and to help slow down production of units to help fight their forces. The Baltic states and Ukraine fall with no casualties taken, with only the attacks in Bryansk seeing any strong Soviet resistance. The Germans do suffer 50% casualties here, with 3 of the 6 divisions being lost, but do capture the strategically important region, which will force the Soviets to recapture it. The air raid sees another German bomber shot down, but another 15 points of damage to the Soviet factories. German troops are now reorganized and repositioned to better suit the coming plan, with the main bodies of 4th and 6th armies now arriving in Ukraine, setting up around their new prize, Kiev, the 3rd largest city in the Soviet Union. Now, 1st and 2nd Panzers, along with all the air along the Eastern Front, regroup in eastern Poland, with the 17th Army in the north getting into position to attack the Soviets' 2nd largest city, Leningrad, next round. Soviets do see the Germans' new positions, taking almost all forward pressure off the Soviet forces and giving them some breathing room and time to plan. What was once seen as a doomed situation, with 2 of the 3 Soviet armies unable to make it back to the capital in time for a straight German dash to the city, but now it seems as though they've completely hit the brakes. The Allies are stunned, but also enthusiastic, as they believe this is Germany signing their death certificate. Now the 41st, 62nd, and 14th armies will converge on the city, making it an uncrackable fortress, at least for the foreseeable future, while the Western Allies plan to pick Germany apart across other fronts of the Third Reich. The Soviets recapture Bryansk and ensure at least another round of safety for the time being. The Soviets have a thinly held forward defensive line, stretching from Leningrad in the north and running south along the western border of Belarus, before turning east along the northern patch of the Pripyat marshes, before yet again turning south just west of Kursk and down to the city of Rostov and to the Black Sea east of Kiev. This line will not hold, and is merely a speed bump to slow down the Axis advances. The main body of the 62nd falls back to Smolensk, with a large portion of the 41st accompanying them. The 14th continues their march west, now only 2 rounds from reaching the city. Something I have not covered much in the past episodes is the secret mission the Soviets are conducting with a mechanized infantry division from the 41st Army making their way through the Middle East and heading towards Egypt. Now, why is this important? Well, the Soviets' plan is to capture the Axis holdings in Africa, namely Libya, Tobruk, Ethiopia, and Somaliland. This would generate a staggering 14 IPC increase for the Soviet economy, completely offsetting the losses they have suffered from Germany thus far. This plan was delayed, however, with the British failing to capture Iraq in round 1 to open the path for the mechanized infantry to make their way for Egypt. Another setback is the Soviets only send 1 mechanized infantry division, which will dramatically slow down their ability to capture the territories quickly and provide the now suffering nation with much needed IPCs. Since once they get to Cairo, they will have to either choose to continue west or south to capture the territories before doubling back to make their way for the other batch. The Soviets should have sent 2 mechanized infantry divisions to ensure a speedy capture of both regions, now effectively turning this, what was supposed to be a smooth operation, into at least a 6-round ordeal at best. However, hindsight is 2020. And we shall see if this is enough to save the nation. Now, hopping over to the Pacific, we have 2 major operations underway by the Japanese. Operation Lightning, under Paul Hutchinson, will see the capture of Hong Kong and French Indochina, and a massive attack against the Chinese in Western China. This will kill the main body of the Chinese and Communist forces, which they hope will lead to the total collapse of Chinese resistance. In the South Pacific, we see the ground offensive under Admiral Tom Bonner against a slew of resource-rich islands begin. This is Operation Thunder, with landings in Java, Borneo, Celebes, and the Philippines, with the original plan having called for them to also capture Sumatra, completing their national objective and receiving their bonus. But the Anzac Navy had other plans, successfully blocking Admiral Bonner's forces from reaching this island. Out of pure anger, Admiral Bonner makes a revision to the plan and orders his forces to now capture New Britain. This would effectively knock out the Anzac's bonuses, dropping their economy by an entire $10 a turn. The landings on the island go relatively smoothly, with the Anzac destroyer being destroyed and the path now open for the next round to capture Sumatra. Admiral Bonner does make his way to the Philippines to link up with the Emperor to combine their fleets for the bombardment of the Americans in the Philippines. The American defenses are no match for the 18-inch guns of the battleships Congo and Nagato. Admiral Bonner and Emperor Smith have just scored their first kills of the war. Now, General Hutchinson provides air cover for his forces in Hong Kong, seeing a successful attack there with no losses. But for the main attack against the Chinese, they see a complete bloodbath. Japan does prevail victorious after several rounds of combat, suffering the loss of 9 infantry divisions here alone, with 2 more additional losses in other fronts. China suffers the complete loss of 16 divisions. The total number of losses over the course of the Japanese turn are as follows. Axis forces, 11 infantry divisions, roughly 550,000 men, and a submarine. Allied forces, 12 nationalist Chinese divisions, 4 communist divisions, as well as the Flying Tigers, and 2 British and 2 American divisions as well as an Anzac destroyer and transport, for a grand total of just over 1 million men lost this turn. These Japanese attacks do mark the first American blood spilled in this war, with those men belonging to General Morgan's American 8th Army. Now, General Morgan does bring his fleet, which was just east of Japan in Seazone 16, back to Hawaii to regroup, since President Danny Davis is worried about the Australians after the recent hit to their economy. He wants to push south to hopefully link up with the fleet the Anzac are planning to build this round, to pose a threatening force to the Japanese and hopefully cut the Japanese access to threaten India, which would free up the 69th to strike into China. And speaking of China, they may have suffered a catastrophic amount of losses this go, but they have not been defeated. Nationalist forces do capture Szechuan, reopening the Burma Road for Western supplies. They now have 11 IPCs for next round. Now, the Americans don't do much else in the Pacific once General Morgan reaches Pearl Harbor, since they are planning to push south to aid the Australians. However, in the Atlantic, General Andrew Beveridge is just beginning his moves. General Beveridge is now arriving off the coast of Gibraltar with a massive American fleet and landing force. He had positioned USS Leviathan in Sea Zone 1 and 2 last round to give his planes the range needed to provide air cover during the landings. However, when they were almost in position, reports came in that German air forces that were in Gibraltar had been recalled to Paris and pulled out of the fortress. This was shocking news, especially on the eve of the attack. President Davis urges General Beveridge to stand the fighters down, as he does not want to risk the air power to the German AA if there are no Axis fighters present. The Americans thought they had the numbers to do the attack without them anyways, so they order them to stand down. Now, General Beveridge lands with the first wave during the attack, with American bombardments from USS Strong and USS Teddy Roosevelt lighting the shores up with explosions so large, many thought no man could survive such attacks. Well, they normally would be right, but the Americans had fired too far inland, completely missing the Axis defensive positions, which soon let loose with machine gun and mortar fire. The Americans are ripped to pieces on the beaches, with 3 divisions completely destroyed in just a matter of moments. The Americans press on, soon making it to the AA gun positions and put them out of action. This happens just before the Axis knock out a mechanized division. Soon it is a round by round combat, with each side suffering a loss of 1 unit a round. It is an absolute bloodbath, with the 3 Axis divisions inflicting double that on the Americans. 3 infantry, 1 artillery, and 2 mechanized divisions has been lost in the fighting before they were able to subdue the Axis defenders. General Beveridge does survive the attacks, however, only barely. The US First Army, once known as the Big Red One, is now known as the Big Bloody One, with 75% losses in their first operation. This has a horrible effect on all allied nations, with Germany now not seriously threatened for at least another 2 rounds. Feels as though they have the time needed for Field Marshal Scamardella to get the job done with Operation Threadneedle. The Allies are horrified at the staggering losses and worried about the time needed to rearm and refit the American First Army, with this now affecting the forces able to be fielded in the Pacific, as now funds need to be rerouted to the Atlantic and away from that was promised to General Morgan's Pacific Command. Things are in absolute chaos as we enter the UK turn. The British now know they have to keep the Soviets alive, even without the Americans' help, for another couple rounds. They plan to build another factory in the Middle East to begin arming the 8th Army for serious intervention into Russia. They capture Tunisia and Kenya and begin reinforcing Egypt now that the Italians have the ability to hit them here. Even sending 2 British destroyers into Sea Zone 99 and 96 to block landing attempts in the Eastern Mediterranean. While in the East, General Leaving's 69th Army wastes no time in retaliating for the loss of Hong Kong. The British strike Siam and capture French Indochina, now securing all of Southeast Asia for the British Empire. The main body of the 69th is now in Shan State, with a small contingent remaining in Burma to fall back to India if the Japanese attempt to swing around and strike India. But where is General Leavings during all this? Well, last round, if you recall, the British High Command met in Persia at the Tehran Conference. It had been decided that all the British forces in the region would make their way north. After the losses of the main Chinese army, the Japanese are in position to strike into the rear of Russia. They fear they will attack the 14th before they are able to make it to Moscow, and so they send all their force available to Novosibirsk to ensure the safe passage of the 14th Army. This includes Generals Shannon Brincat and Jason Leavings. Now, Italy had commissioned their new battleship, the RMS Admiral Swilly, last round and had actually planned to commission another battleship this round. But that was before the fall of Gibraltar and the now two sizable Allied fleets off Egypt and Gibraltar, totally surrounding their naval forces. They instead armed Italy with 8 new infantry divisions and a big gun artillery unit. They do, however, land in Africa, recapturing Tunisia and destroying the British 8th Army artillery unit in this area. They are attempting to show force on the continent yet again, hoping to hold on to their African colonial holdings. Germany does begin to worry, however, as Rome is now under threat from a British landing force. The Italians are now spread thin, having landed in Africa, taken out the 2 British destroyers in the Mediterranean, and have now left their battleship and cruiser overexposed. Germany is pretty frustrated since they will need to send air power to Rome to ensure no Allied landing is attempted, which they fear will slow down their operations elsewhere. But for us to know if this is the case, we will have to wait for next round. With the only other notable action being that the Anzac and French forces fall back to Egypt, and the French reopen the pathway to Italy with their destroyer taking out the Italian destroyer off the coast of Egypt in Sea Zone 98. The Australians also put to sea a respectable navy, commissioning a new carrier, the HMAS Gallipoli. And with that, this round comes to an end. And what a round this was, with massive battles in Western China that have left the Chinese absolutely devastated, and an explosive expansion of Japanese naval forces in the South Pacific. Germany scrapping their old plan in favor of a new push south, as Americans turn the shores of Gibraltar red with blood. President Danny Davis does release a historic speech the night after the attack to the American people to lift their spirits after news of the catastrophic losses reaches the public.
My fellow Americans, today we remember a victory not just of strategy, but of spirit. Gibraltar, an ancient rock that guards the gateway to the Mediterranean, has been reclaimed. Once held by the Axis, it now stands again for freedom, because brave Americans and their allies gave everything to make it so. They stormed cliffs under fire, they crossed mined waters, they faced the enemy not for conquest, but for the cause of liberty. Many of them will not return home. They now lie beneath foreign skies, but they do not lie forgotten. Their courage lives on in our hearts, in our flag, and in the freedom they help preserve. To our families, we offer more than gratitude. We offer a solemn promise that their sacrifice will shape a peace worthy of their memory. Let us honor them, not just in words, but in how we carry forward, with unity, with resolve, with a steadfast belief in the ideals they died defending. May God bless the fallen, may He comfort those who mourn, and may He continue to bless the United States of America.
And I think President Davis has just about said it all. We'll see you here next week for round 5. If you enjoy this series, please like and subscribe so we can hopefully grow this channel and bring you more exciting war coverage in the future. And please check out the inspiration for this series, World War II in Real Time, hosted by Indy Nidell, my all-time favorite YouTuber. Link in the description. See you soon.